1, 2, 3. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Peace Machine RPM, where we are all back here today to speak with you about really cool stuff. And today I'm joined with our usual cast of characters by Roy Woody, also known as Roy Peace, Roy Casagranda, Benefsha I cannot say your last name. I'm so sorry.
Madaninejad.
Madaninejad. Okay.
You got it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
And Ramesh Nadeem, can everybody please give us a update on what you did this week and how you're feeling this week? What's going on? Can we start with Roy Peace?
Oh yeah. So this week feeling good actually. I went and ran, so my knee hurts a little bit. Getting a little bit like I'll be 40 in a few weeks, so I guess I'm feeling those 40-year-old pains. And then, but other than that, good. Yeah, good week this week. Last week before going back to work, so last vacation
Roy,
week.
what happened to your forehead, dude?
Yeah.
Oh, so when I was a kid, my aunt was watching me and my brothers and sisters, and we had a grocery store like right around the corner. Yeah, it's a scar. It's a massive scar.
Oh, it's an old scar. It just looks kind of fresh.
You probably never noticed it, but like a lot of people, yeah, my friend I've been talking to forever, he just noticed it yesterday, which is kind of funny. But like, we were playing. My aunt took the groceries home, yeah, and the grocery cart. So me and my brothers and sisters were playing on it, and I just got scraped on a piece of the metal off of the shopping cart. It had like 48 stitches across.
Oh my god!
Oh, I bet your grandmother was thrilled.
I know, yeah. My mom was upset with my aunt for like a long time, and it's so funny. She's like she's just so fun. She's like one of my favorite aunts. I love her. Yeah, but my aunt's like she's always bickering about my mom. She's like, yeah, it's so funny.
You got the scars to prove that love.
Exactly.
So what'd you do this week? How's everything going? Did you hear any news that was upsetting to you or happy to you?
Upsetting? No, but today I am excited that Cori Bush will be sworn in today. I love that. Yeah, Cori Bush, I sent her so much money, and I just a massive supporter.
Fantastic.
Her win was like, it's just awesome when she won. So I'm excited about that. Yeah.
Right on. How about you, Ramesh? How are you doing?
Doing well, doing good. I am in Karachi now, which is amazing and so different and so bustling. And the sun is out, and the fruits on the fruit stands in the streets are different, and it's been wonderful so far. Also gearing up to come back on the 9th.
Can you tell us where that is?
Karachi is in Pakistan. It's in the southern portion of the country, and it's right alongside the coast. It's a port city.
Wow, how beautiful.
And it's a
massive port city.
Massive mega city.
How many people live there?
Well, like there's like the official population estimates, and then there's these sort of unofficial, estimates, right? And then there's a census itself, which you just have to ignore.
Right.
But sort of if we look holistically at the whole like metro area and look at the accurate more. We're close to 20 million, and close to the population of the way I explain it to folks is that like imagine the entire population of Australia concentrated in a single city. Wow. That's where we're at. Yeah, and more diverse.
The size of Texas.
Wow, that's too many people.
Many.
That is way too many people.
But that's the thing about the cities like Karachi or throw in Cairo, which is another. These massive cities, they're wonderful. You don't feel crushed. You feel embraced. You're surrounded by people who, I don't know. There's something so warm and loving about it. It's the opposite of the American sense of what a big city is.
Yeah, it's so
Western,
human.
I would think, because Paris is really like that too. And London and Italy, they don't embrace.
Berlin is one of my favorite cities, in part because it is such a massive.
I love massive cities, but I will say that I did not feel embraced by any of them.
But that's because you've been going to the wrong ones. You need to go to Cairo and Karachi and Tehran.
Well, that said, what is it like during COVID?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask, Ramesh.
Yeah. I mean, masks everywhere, temperature checks if you're going anywhere, indoors, that kind of stuff. But like out in the open air and in the streets, the life is, the same as it otherwise would have been. Yeah.
That's
the
great.
Informal economy is chugging along, all of that good stuff.
And
but Pakistan has done an amazing job of managing COVID.
Pakistan overall has done an amazing job. So there have been smart, like at the very start of the pandemic, all international borders were closed, all flights were suspended before any other country was doing that. That's probably largely because Pakistan shares land borders with both China and Iran, both of which were like rather early hotspots.
Yeah.
So they shut down borders really, really, really quickly. And once the disease did get in, because it did, they then, locked down the entire country, shut down schools very early on, shut down the economy. No one was going anywhere. Nothing was happening. Intercity travel was suspended entirely.
Wow.
And then after that point, more recently, what they've done when they did start reopening and then pockets of COVID were spreading is they would engage in smart lockdown. So they'd shut down just a block of a single street or just a single small sector of a neighborhood at a time whenever there was a case reported there.
Wow.
And then go in and do contact tracing, testing of all those places, all of that. Yeah.
How embarrassing
which is
for
so
the United
wild.
States.
Yeah. And when you look at GDP per capita,
we are ridiculous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's shameful.
Well, thank you for that. I wish I were there instead of here. Actually, I've been wishing that for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere but here. But we're glad you're on your way back. When are you going to come back? The 9th?
The 9th. Yeah. So I'll be leaving on the 9th and I'll be arriving on the 9th. Yeah.
Excellent.
After a long, long time in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm not looking forward to.
Well, don't forget to get up and walk around. No blood clots.
Yeah.
Hey, Roy War, how are you?
So I'm good. Benefsha and I had a really fun last week of the year. I'm just going to give you the nutshell version, but I think Benefsha ended up with me and her mother in the ER on Monday and Tuesday. And then since then, I think she's been to like 4 or 5 doctors because she's taking me or her mother.
Yeah.
God.
But we survived it. And
We survived.
And it was dramatic and exciting.
Mm-hmm.
May you live in exciting times, as the curse goes.
Yeah, I don't like it.
So 2020 really just wouldn't leave us alone. I'm not convinced it will for at least 3 more days anyway. I think we're still in 2020. We're just
I'm not going to be relaxed until the man is in office.
Yeah, maybe 121 is when we can finally 2021.
Yeah.
We finally just go.
Thank you. Yeah.
Back to the old imperialism.
Right.
Yeah.
What about you,
The
Benefsha?
comfortable imperialism.
Hold
Yeah, familiar stuff.
Normal.
I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna ward off some evil.
Okay.
There we go.
We're doing the warding.
I'll match you.
I love it.
All I
have
have
nothing.
is something that's illegal. I don't think that's good, but I could do it.
I got nothing.
So we're going to talk a little bit about democracy today.
Hold on. I didn't go.
Well, you didn't. I thought you said you went.
She was warding out the evil before she went.
Oh, okay. So you are going to go. Okay. All right, your turn. Your turn.
Yeah, I just want to say that all the healthcare professionals we saw were just so amazing. Really, like I just have not had this good of an experience. Maybe I was sensing it. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was them. Maybe, I don't know. But it was all so wonderful.
It's kind of weird to me that Seton Southwest had full beds. I mean, they never had.
No, it wasn't Seton Southwest.
It was St. David's is where
I was going to say, they never had anyone there.
St. David's is where I went. Seton's where her mom went.
Okay, yeah.
We decided to split it up.
Yeah, as far as possible.
Yeah. No, we did both South hospitals.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I have to say, just since piggyback on what Benefsha said and the fact that we plugged Seton and St. David's, I love the hospital systems in Austin.
Oh God.
I've compared it to other cities I've been in, like Houston. I don't care if Houston has the largest medical center in the world. Austin has better hospitals. It's
right.
really, we were really lucky.
We are, and we write, and Seton will write most everything off except for the doctors. I mean, they'd like for you to pay the doctors, but other than that, they just write it off.
So that's exactly my first real kind of groundbreaker experience was with Seton. I brought my dad in, and the doctor comes up to me and she says, we're working on your dad's insurance because he probably is eligible for Medicare, but I just need you to know we don't care. Medicare or no Medicare, we're going to treat him. Don't worry about it. He's in good hands. I'm like, wow.
How did that happen? Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy how good they are. I mean, and they've got satellite offices where they work with MAP, the medical assistance program of Austin. And I mean, I got to see them forever when I didn't have insurance, and I have a ton of medical issues, and it cost me, $10 to go to the doctor every month. And it was like $2 for my drugs. And I did not have insurance. Austin took care of me. So yeah, it is. We are lucky to live here, I think.
I just gotta say, like at the end of the year, how everyone has their best of list. I gotta say the nurses and the health professionals, man, they deserve to be top of that list. They deserve that. What is that? That time cover.
They deserve a holiday.
Yes, that's it. They should be on time. People of the year.
Oh my God, that would upset Trump so much. They should get the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
They deserve the recognition. You know what I mean?
Wouldn't that be great? Just the entire industry. And then you could say, planet. If you're a nurse, you could later say, I won the Nobel Peace Prize, but Trump can't.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true.
Or give them a pay raise, give them good benefits,
what?
Give them security.
No.
Here Amish goes with this socialism.
Thoughts and prayers and an award. That's what we have.
That's all we have for them.
How do you split up $1 million to 200 million people?
It's hard.
Dang.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about all this stuff, as we already have started doing, and we're going to kind of focus on democracy and Athens. Actually, we'd like to go back just a little bit to Athens and discuss, because of course that's where we believe the birthplace of democracy is. And we're also going to maybe touch on some of the stuff that we've got going on in the real world, which is the stimulus check and the COVID that's still here, regardless of the change in year. We've still got these issues here. There is a repudiation of libertarianism, I think we've all seen, and the terror in Tennessee, that they're not calling this man a terrorist, and he is a terrorist. I don't know why the color of your skin makes you a terrorist. It's the same action. Yeah. It's the same motivation. So with that, let's see, I'm going to open up and ask if anyone has any stories, knowing secretly that Roy War actually has one.
You've unveiled our secret.
Man.
Roy, what you got for us today?
Okay, so because we're going to talk about Athens, before we do that, I want to put in a plug for George Orwell, because George Orwell predicted the predicament that we're in on the planet today. Unfortunately, there are other people who wrote dystopias like Aldous Huxley who also nailed it. But anyway, we're going to focus on Orwell for now. In 1948, he wrote the book 1984. I got the Aldous Huxley thing stuck in
Different guy.
Different guy. He wrote 1984, and in it he talks about Big Brother having the Newspeak dictionary, where they would literally every few years go through and purge words from the language, and then you had to go and read the dictionary to know what words you could and couldn't use. Well, that obviously isn't what happened, right? Every year the Oxford English Dictionary adds words, but also just the idea of making people read something is kind of weird, especially in the United States. I mean, right? Maybe in England they would read things. I think that was the problem, is he was from a country of literate people. And anyway, so we pulled that off. We did it. But the way we did it was actually really amazing. I'm not sure the extent to which the thesaurus was involved, but the thesaurus to me is like the hallmark of what's wrong with the United States. Because the way we deleted the words was we conflated the words.
Right.
So English is a crazy language. It has more words than any other language on the planet. Number 2, by the way, is Arabic. And Arabic and English, as a result, tend to be very poetic languages because, right, you want to use the right word that sounds right. And turns out there's 20 words with similar meanings, not the same meaning.
Yeah.
Right.
English is actually, because it has so many words, can be really precise. And you can kind of pin down a meaning. Like, for example, leisure does not mean the same thing as entertainment. These are 2 different words. But Americans they don't know the difference between the 2 words, and they use them together. And as a result, we've lost the difference between the 2 meanings. Like, since I opened this can of worms, entertainment doesn't require your active participation. Leisure does.
Yeah.
So if you're reading a book, that's leisure. If you're watching TV, that's entertainment. Right? Because
what if you're learning from the TV show?
I think it's still, well, then it's not entertainment, it's learning.
Oh, damn. I'm conflating the 2. There you go.
Yeah. So as long as you're actively engaged, it's leisure. And if you're not required to do anything, it's entertainment.
So is Arabic also a living language? They add words as well?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, basically every spoken language on the planet is a living language just because there's no way
to yeah, but there's some that are falling off. You can see them dying.
Oh, sure. And then there are languages that attempt to stop from adding words like French.
Yeah, I love that. French is resisting any kind
French
of Arabic
is like, fuck you.
Oh, wow.
I lived there when they instituted the no smoking in the metros. I mean, there were men getting on the train with cigarettes just to say fuck you. You know, and the gendarme would come up and say you can't smoke, and they'd be like, what are you gonna do? And they'd be like, and they turn around and walk off. I mean, they will revolt like that, and they know how to do it.
Yeah.
And they will shut shit down. They shut trains down and the garbage down all the time. And I wonder what would happen in a place like Pakistan if that happened in that large city. What would happen if they stopped picking up the garbage? You know, if somebody went on strike like that, and why don't they?
It happens. Yeah, this is a flex of power. If you're a political power with certain kind of like authority or ability, if you want to get something done, yeah, you shut down the city, and it's relatively easy to do if you cut off just the right traffic corridors or motorways or whatever else. All of a sudden, the city grinds to an absolute halt. Yeah, and it happens regularly.
Wow. See, but we don't have that kind of power here. I mean, even unions don't do that kind of stuff. I mean, it takes a lot for that to happen, I think.
Especially since our unions have been so crippled. I mean, our unions are in terrible shape.
Yeah, they are. So what's your story?
Okay, so the reason I'm doing the Orwell thing is because it also means that Americans don't know the meaning of words like democracy and republic and right, this is a problem because it means that we can't have conversations about these concepts.
And going back to what Susie was suggesting via our topics today, or terror, or terrorist, or terrorism, or libertarianism, or
or capitalism, or anything, or socialism,
Yeah, what do these words mean, and how do they affect us? I mean, like you said, conflating. I think a lot of people conflate Marxism and socialism, and Democrats are socialists just all of a sudden. So
yeah, and if only that was true.
Yeah, right. If only we were progressive.
If only
that was true.
That would be so great.
It'd be amazing. So let's do Athens real quick. So first of all, I'm 100% certain Athens was not the world's first democracy. The problem is Athens is the one that we have the documentation for. So just so we're clear, we talk about Athens because we're kind of stuck. Having said that, before Athens became a democracy, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so certain that it's almost certainly not. First of all, because it's impossible not to imagine that there was nobody who came up with the idea before. When Cyrus the Great, the first Persian emperor, died, a council of his advisors got together specifically to talk about what to do next. And one of the things they floated was, should we make the Persian Empire a democracy? They actually asked that question, and they decided not to in the end. They decided to go with this sort of one-person monarchical system, but they actually floated the idea, and the fact that they did way before Athens became a democracy suggests that at least the Persians had the concept.
Also, the thing is that they just found out, we always say that a language was born in Mesopotamia. They just recently, writing. They recently found out that it was a French man actually found out that it was simultaneously at the same time an invention in Elam, which is the old Persia. So it's very possible.
The southwest corner.
Yeah, which is very possible, right? This is
Wow.
of how inventions kind of work. They happen simultaneously in several different places.
Yeah.
Isn't this the model we moved to when it comes to this origin of agriculture too? Like we at one point in time thought that it originated in one singular location and then spread, but now we see that there's these like multiple origins, and people start a little bit of agriculture and then they go back to their, you know, hunter gathering, and then back to agriculture and all this, and we have this, you know.
Right, because the only reason you do agriculture is because you have food stress and you need to maximize calories per acre. And agriculture is great for calories per acre. Gathering and hunting is not great for that, but gathering and hunting is great for labor. So calories invested and then calories returned. And so if your goal is to maximize joy in life, you want to be a gatherer and hunter. If your goal is to suffer, go for agriculture.
And you want to be a gatherer hunter in an environment where you've curated the entire forest, the entire landscape to be a garden-like landscape for you, which is what they think may have taken place in the Amazon, right? You have indigenous folks who for centuries and centuries or even longer than that have curated this landscape to produce certain kind of plants, materials, all this stuff that they needed. So that you know, it reorients how you think about agriculture, cultivation of land, and what wilderness or wildlife is.
And also people, because of this, transformed over to agriculture very slowly. In Egypt, for example, after 7,000 years after going over to agriculture, they still produced 40% of their food from means other than agriculture. It took 7,000 years to become 60% dependent on agriculture. It's so much labor, and it creates war, and it creates population density, but it's also really hard to do infanticide. So if you're looking at, oh, do I kill my child and keep gathering and hunting, or do I do a little bit of agriculture on the side so I can feed my child? You do the agriculture on the side. So that parental impulse is why we're here. So, okay, so back to Athens.
Maybe y'all.
Athens was a monarchy. It ended up in a civil war. It's a city-state. So civil wars and city-states, of course, are nightmares because you're literally fighting block to block. There's no battles in the fields outside of the city because the person that leaves the city loses instantaneously. So you've got to fight in the buildings, and the city is dying. People are fleeing. The economy's collapsing. The factions get together and they go, look, we need a way out of this. Well, we need to agree to something. And so what they do is they come up with this idea that they're going to hand the city's future over to one man. His name is Solon, who is considered the smartest man in Athens. And he's going to design a new constitution for them. And all the factions will accept whatever he gives them. And what he comes up with is a republic. So a monarchy is where one person rules, and it doesn't have to be literally one person. There could be like a cabinet. There could be, there could be some delegation of power. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with that one person. In a republic, what you have is a small group of people who represent. So the people aren't present, they're represented. And it's not the public that decides, it's the republic that decides, because it's one step removed from the public. So what happens is Solon creates this republic where the people will elect basically a legislature, and the legislature will make all the rules for them. And then less than a century into the republic, an Athenian statesman gets up in front of everybody and goes, I think we can do better. I think we can take this one step further and we can make a democracy. And he convinces the republic to vote to create a democracy. And what happened in that moment was Athens handed over its political authority to the citizens. Now, the voting eligible citizens. So this is where people get into trouble.
Yeah.
If you look at the voting population of Athens, it was probably about 20%. So to be a citizen, you had to be born in Athens. There was zero possibility for immigration. And if you were Athenian and you were born anywhere other than Athens, too bad. You're not going to ever vote. So you had to be a citizen, you had to be born in Athens to at least one Athenian parent.
Wow.
So if you moved and you were not Athenian, you were from Thrace and you marry somebody from Argos and you have a baby in Athens, that child is not an Athenian, period. It's got to be at least one Athenian parent. That's citizenship. But to be eligible to vote, not only did you have to be a citizen, but you had to be free, so slaves couldn't vote. Yeah. And you had to have completed military service, which meant there was effectively an age limit. You probably had to be 26 or so, and you had to be male because only men were eligible for military service. And so by the time you were done, about 20% of the population could vote. But they voted on everything. They voted on whether to go to war, whether to expand trading rights, whether to fix the potholes in the roads, whether to build a new wall, everything. So that 20% directly made all the decisions.
Yeah.
Democracy really just literally means rule of the many. In the United States, we have 537 people who are elected to the federal government who make the decisions, right? Because there's 100 senators, 435 representatives, a president, and a vice president. So 537 is the number out of 330 million. By definition, that's a tiny, tiny percentage of the population. If we were Athens, we would have 6.2 million people making those decisions that 537 do.
Oh my God.
That's the difference between democracy and a republic.
See, but the cleverness of this is creating new categories which are I want to say deviously named because they took democracy and split it into two. So you have representative democracy, you have direct democracy. Direct democracy then becomes what happened in Athens, and representative democracy becomes actually the republic. And so there's a conflation of the republic with representative democracy, but nobody ever says republic. They always call it democracy. And then they just drop the representative and say democracy, which is where the issue comes from.
And
so
when you go ahead, I'm sorry.
Words and play with categories and creating new, very problematic sort of language play. That's intentional. That's intentional. Yeah. It's all very intentional.
Absolutely. Socialism, for example, has become a pejorative. The idea of one man, one vote is nobody understands. You say one man, one vote, and people in America think, yeah, well, that's what we do. No, it's not. It is not what we do. And I think a lot of people think that is exactly what we do. Well, my vote counts. No, it doesn't. I'm sorry. But if you live in a red state and your vote, you did vote, but it didn't carry, then your vote has nothing. It means nothing. And go ahead.
So how do I make sense of, and what do I do with when Senator Mike Lee tweets out and says, we're not a democracy, period, when he repudiates even that idea? And when the entire Republican Party, not the entire Republican Party, but a lot of prominent voices on the right and in the Republican Party sort of back up his views and kind of remove democracy from being the objective and try and emphasize, liberty, peace, blah, 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 all this other stuff is the objective of the republic, not democracy. Democracy is something to be pushed away right now. What democracy is he talking about when he's trying to create some distance from it or push away from it?
So, that's a really good question because, Madison in Federalist Paper number 10. So Madison is the guy who wrote our Constitution. We call it the Virginia Plan, but it could have just as easily been called the Madison Plan. Madison says in Federalist Paper number 10, I thought about whether we should be a democracy or a republic. I went and read history, and I concluded that there has never been a democracy that's lasted a century. And it's true. Well, it's not true. The Iroquois Confederacy lasted several centuries, but right, they're brown, so he wrote them off. So there's never, according to him, there was never a democracy that lasted a century. And he said, but on the other hand, the Republic of Venice has almost reached the 1,000-year mark. I want to say it was like 970 years old when he was writing Federalist Paper number 10. And so he's looking at it going, that's not bad. 1,000 years, it's really cool. It didn't make it, for the record. Napoleon Bonaparte took it out before it got to the 1,000-year mark. He couldn't have waited a couple of years. Like, what was wrong with that?
He was such a little shit.
He was such a little turd. Yeah. Anyway, so there has always been this sort of tension between whether the United States should be a republic or a democracy. And on the right, the assumption was that the people are just too stupid to rule themselves. And I think that's been proven true. I think they're absolutely right.
I don't take issue with that.
I don't take issue with that. But as a general rule on the left, the assumption is, because they haven't been given the tools to figure out how to rule themselves. They've been intentionally sabotaged. And if we would just stop sabotaging them, the people could figure this out. Yeah. And they could, like, if we just, for example, made it so the public schools were equally funded, like just simple steps would go so far. So I think what you're seeing there is an old tension in the United States, but the Republicans are trying desperately to try and figure out a way to make sense of, this guy beat you by 7 million votes. Why do you think you ought to be the winner? And how do you put that into your mind? Oh, well, we're not a democracy. But then in 2 days, when it becomes convenient for them to say, I stand up for the democracy, they'll be all over the word democracy, because that's what America's become. It's a country of hypocrites who prey on the fact that nobody knows the meaning of the words. And they can and everybody's practiced in doublethink, Democrats and Republicans alike. We're mad at Trump for being a rapist. What about Bill Clinton? That dude was a rapist.
No,
Or the allegations against Biden, right?
What was that?
Allegations against Biden.
And then allegations against Biden. And we should be critical of these things.
Absolutely.
And not be hypocrites.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's totally dead on. I think Bill Clinton lost me when he lied. I don't care what he did, because I do because he was older and obviously used his influence. That's very disturbing to me. But when he looked dead at us and lied to us, when he lied to Congress, that's when he lost me. I was just like, I can't do this. But now it's just rote. Everyone lies to Congress, or they just don't show up.
I think the politicians do, they lie. So
lying.
I have a problem with his existence.
Look at Biden, right? He dropped out at one point because he did plagiarism. You know what I mean? And then now he's gonna be the next president. Possibly. Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of funny.
Going back to what Ramesh was talking about with the question of, Republican comes and says our democracy is dead, or this is the other thing about representative democracy in the US. There's two factions. One, democracy for them means liberty. You actually, I think, brought this up. And the other faction, democracy for them means justice. And if one says democracy is dead, they could mean completely, right? It's like along these two tracks.
Exactly.
Along these two tracks, and they mean completely different things.
Which then gets us to another problem, which is this conflating justice with democracy. So when I can't tell you how many arguments I've gotten into with people about Athens, where they'll say, wait a minute, women couldn't vote. They had slaves. Dude, they had human sacrifice too, just for the record.
Yeah, it was.
Stop whitewashing that about the Greeks.
and infanticide. They would leave their children.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Bible too, they did that.
Right. Underneath
and by children, I'm sorry, I mean they're girl children. I mean they're girl infants.
You mean the ones that the throwaway kids?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is ironic because they're the guys that make the army. Anyway, I don't know. how do you have your next generation of soldiers if you keep killing your women? Underneath the temple of Zeus, there's a 12-year-old boy that they sacrificed and dropped in there. So, you know, like, and you know, Homer tells us they did human sacrifice. Plato tells us they did human sacrifice. Stop.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
hey, it's only barbaric when they do it on this continent, when the brown folks do it.
Right.
That's right. Well, that's when
Yeah.
and so let's
Right?
lead into that. That is what's called terrorism. Now, when white people do
before
it,
we do that, I want to make sure we clear this democracy.
Sorry.
Right. So what you're doing is you're conflating two things. Democracy just means rule by the many. It has nothing to do with we should have civil rights or civil liberties or human rights. Those are separate issues. Yeah. So Athens was what most people would call, using the terminology we have today, an illiberal democracy. I'm nervous about using the word illiberal because liberal also means that you support capitalism, and nobody in the world at that time supported capitalism. What we really mean was that Athens had no civil rights and no civil liberties. And as a result, but it was still a democracy, 100% a democracy. It was ruled by the many. 20% is a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, Athens had property rights, though, right?
Yeah, and civil rights
did
for the citizens, right?
Aristotle.
Yeah, and you could be judged by well, there were some civil rights. It was just perhaps for the 20%.
Yes, absolutely,
okay,
right.
Yeah, who were citizens, right?
So women didn't have civil rights, right? Women were so crushed by Athenians' misogyny. Women were not allowed to be in public. And if a woman did go into public and she wasn't a prostitute, she had to veil.
And veil means not just on their heads; they had to cover their faces, and their heads had to be down. You couldn't see their faces; their heads had to be. They wouldn't leave the house if they had to go to the baths, for instance. They had to just wear something and put their heads down.
The only social activity women were allowed was to go fetch the water.
Oh, and then there were there was a chamber and an antechamber in the houses.
There were two
living rooms. They were inside, way inside.
Yeah.
Wow. They couldn't answer the doors. The slave women could, but the propertied women, not the propertied, I'm sorry. Well, they were the property of the men.
they were still property. Yeah.
They were, but they didn't have property. Unless it came down from their fathers, that gets complicated. Or they lived in temples, in the sense that they became
right, like the priestess for Athena.
Yeah, they became priestesses.
They could be holy people. Yeah.
So they were basically slaves.
I mean,
in some sense,
it was a class issue, to be honest.
Class,
The higher your class, the less freedom you had if you were a woman.
Exactly. Yeah. And there were arguments that women slaves had much more freedom, although they were owned. So it's very complicated.
And they had three levels of prostitutes. There were high class prostitutes, middle class, and there were low class prostitutes. And I don't remember which one, but one is pornoi. I think pornoi is the middle or the lower, which is where we get the word pornography from, which is ironic because it means literally pornography is prostitution. It's just, anyway. But so women were so excluded from a public life, it was taboo to say a woman's name in public.
Right. But at the same time, and even before, we could possibly talk about another civilization, a much older civilization that gets villainized. That's even in holy books, the Egyptian civilization, and how they treated their women. And the word civil rights, civil liberties, sort of progressive thinking, human value, none of that in any way gets related to this particular civilization ever. In fact, it's villain. They had slaves, they owned the Jews, they made them do this, right? We never hear anything positive about ancient Egypt. And yet, I couldn't believe, when I first read about how, we might be getting way off topic here, but that's fine. I'm just going to say this in one sentence. When I first read about, and it was a comparative study between how women in Athens and how women in larger Egyptian cities were dealt with, what their lives were like, what their rights were, I busted into tears. Because they chose their own husbands, they married themselves, they divorced themselves. Divorce and marriage wasn't even something they had to go do. It wasn't a civil arrangement. It was up to the woman to choose and let go of a man. They owned property, they ran businesses. I mean, it was insane. It was insane.
Yeah.
It was insane.
Wow.
The medical academies usually had I shouldn't say usually, about half the time had a woman director.
Yeah, and we never hear about that, do we? It's all Athens.
No.
It's all Greece. It's the beginning. It's the
Fertile Crescent.
The cradle of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly the foundation of this civilization.
Yeah.
This misogynistic, slave-based, racist civilization.
Yeah.
We've done well.
Not an accidental starting point to choose.
Not an accident. Not an accident.
This
We
is
want a
not to
small
say that
minority to rule.
Mesopotamia.
We want a majority of of an enslaved population that makes things run. We want
This is not to say that Persian and Mesopotamian culture were not, they definitely, as far as human rights, were nowhere close to Egypt, but whatever.
But compared to Athens,
no, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't.
But that's like
Persians
how
fielded women in battle. They allowed women to own businesses.
Yes, but they definitely were not. It was better than Athens. Yes.
And although Persian upper class women did veil, so did the men, because it was considered taboo to have lower class people look at you. So it was a class distinction.
Yeah.
So
it was a caste thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, compared to Athens, I mean, Sparta looks wonderful compared to Athens. I would have totally Sparta. They were amazing.
But again, it says
but they're
villainized. But this Athens model is what we have chosen as our blueprint.
Not by accident.
Yeah.
So okay. So now, Susie, you started saying something, and I was like, wait.
Oh, I was wondering about the word terror. We were talking about etymology and the
changing of words.
Yeah, and how the guy in Tennessee who just blew up that wall had that huge explosion. Was it Nashville? It was Nashville. Right?
Nashville.
And
AT&T targeted AT&T.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So does somebody know this story a little bit better? Because I just kind of was following it.
Yeah. He targeted AT&T because of the 5G, right? They say that 5G causes COVID or something like that.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, it's all related to all of that.
5G causes COVID.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So he targeted AT&T.
So he
talk about doublethink.
He got up and he decided to blow that up and make a big deal out of it, and that to me would be considered domestic terrorism.
Right.
Straight
so
up.
now we get into the political use of the word terror. So to do that, I think I need to start with the definition of war. Ramesh?
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, start us there. What is war and what is terrorism?
Okay,
Yeah.
so war is when you intentionally target military assets for destruction. So I've got a battalion, I've got another battalion, they attack each other. That's war because they're both targeting military assets for destruction. Terror is when you target civilian assets for destruction, right? Because the goal there isn't to deplete the other side's military ability, it's to deplete the other side's will to fight because you're going after their civilian population. Well, when you define it that way, you realize really quickly that terror is an inherent and integral part of warfare. So World War I, 13 or so million people died, probably about 11.5 million were soldiers. So there was some terror in World War I, but it was obviously mostly war. World War II, probably about 65 million people died, and probably about 15, 20 million of those were soldiers. In other words, World War II was a terror war because the vast majority of the fatalities were in fact civilians. So if I take and I make my RV into a giant bomb and go into a city and detonate it, by definition, I'm committing an act of terrorism. I'm not committing an act of war. If I blow up Berlin or I drop bombs on London, I'm committing an act of terrorism, not an act of war, because I'm not attacking military targets. I'm attacking civilian targets.
But then you get into whose definition, right?
Well, so the United States doesn't want to admit that nuking Hiroshima and Nagasaki were acts of terrorism, but that's exactly what they were, especially because Nagasaki had no military value.
Yeah.
And Hiroshima was 80% destroyed. There was literally no reason on earth it did have military value, but at that point, 80% destroyed it didn't.
Right.
And so the reality is it's like doing a war on terror is insane because it's like saying I'm getting rid of all hammers. It's just a tool you use in warfare. It's not.
There's a rock.
And so because we've politicized the term terror and terrorism, we've made it so we can't say that a white man is a terrorist. This guy is clearly who makes a bomb? A terrorist makes a bomb, unless they're planning to attack a military base. Like if he drove this into Fort Hood,
yeah,
that'd have been an act of war. Mm-hmm. I would have accepted that he's not a terrorist. He's a soldier.
So make the difference for me. The distinction between 9/11 when they crashed into the towers and 9/11 when they crashed into the Pentagon.
So there was an act of war when they attacked the Pentagon and an act of terrorism when they attacked the towers.
Okay.
And then attacking the airplanes that's terrorism also. So even the act of war was at least 50% terror because they still captured an airplane filled with civilians.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
But I think what it breaks down to though sometimes is that, well, not sometimes. Anytime we see like a black or brown person, like the DC sniper, right? He was a terrorist immediately. Yes. You know what I mean? There's a terrorist out there, and we know who he is. But like they hold their words, when it's this Tennessee guy.
He was disturbed.
He had mental illness. Yeah. Dude, what terrorist doesn't have mental illness?
He was taken without incident.
Yeah, and that wreaks havoc on the disabled community as well, right? Because we're trying to say, oh, we don't know if this person who has mental, this person just having a bad day. You know what I mean? We don't know, they'll say this person could go off the hammer anytime they want, you know what I mean? So I think it causes issues on that community as well. Yeah. And
it reinforces that stigma that if you have any kind of mental issues that you are going to be crazy and build a bomb, which is not
exactly
true.
Right.
As a mental person, I will tell you, I have no plans to do anything like that.
Exactly. The United States government does. So we called the operation to start the 2003 genocide of Iraq, we called it shock and awe. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the definition of terror.
Yeah.
I felt like it was this double think moment where we admitted our goal in Iraq in 2003 was to create terror. Mm-hmm. Called it shock and awe, and then the average American's like, "We're doing a war against terrorism." No, you're doing a war of terrorism.
Of terrorism, exactly right. And it's the way they use this, just nonchalantly, just the way they just do things like that. It's
prepositions
insane.
Mean everything.
Thank you, Sacha Baron Cohen, for getting that right.
Even at the very, let's talk about freedom of religion versus freedom from religion. People don't know that here. They don't know which is which. Which one is it?
Yeah.
It's like, really, guys? So my parents like to throw the socialism issue up and say, you are a socialist and you want us to be just like Venezuela. So tell me how my parents are misunderstanding the concept and idea of socialism.
So I think there's so many different brands of socialism that to sort of give a simple definition might be a little complicated.
But they're a republic too, right?
Venezuela, sure, yeah, they have a Congress, they have an elected president. The problem is like our government, there's massive vote rigging, right? So just so I clarify, the way we do most of our vote rigging in the United States, we have had elections where there was clearly manipulation of results. 2000, 2002, 2004, for example, there's very serious evidence of manipulated results. But most of our manipulation, though, is just done through gerrymandering. We just simply make districts that the other side has no chance of winning, and that's a rigged election. That's the definition of rigged election. If you create a district where you know what the outcome is, you've rigged the election, right? And 95% of the congressional districts in the United States are gerrymandered that way. So we're 95% rigged. The 2018 was supposed to be this blue wave, And it was, to a degree, the House did flip, and the Democratic Party did win a lot more votes than the Republican Party did in congressional elections, but we're only like 2% of the seats actually flipped. So a wave for us is a 2% turnover, which is ludicrous. It's preposterous. So I think the nutshell version answer for what socialism is it's the belief that labor ought to be rewarded according to its value, not in such a way that it creates profit for the corporation. In other words, the goal is that if I work my ass off, I shouldn't be paid a pittance so that somebody else can get rich off of my labor. So the goal is to stop the exploitation of labor and to properly award labor. I mean, I think that's the core of a socialist value. So the idea there is you want to be just in the economy. My personal experience is the harder I worked, the less money I made. The less I worked, the more money I made. Like the United States is the opposite of that. We've set it up so that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and there's no real in between.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just
That's
going
right.
back to the other definition of representative democracy or a republic, that either veers towards liberty or justice. It seems to me that veering towards justice and not liberty is the political position of socialists. But in the United States, it hasn't gone anywhere because our financial infrastructure is based on rabid capitalism and unfettered capitalism, and it's like this schizophrenic sort of existence, market existence, where and it keeps changing. We say something, we do something else. It's just this. We are a rabid capitalist society. Even if we're on the verge of teetering and going into non-existence, we sort of come back and say, "Oh my God, let's take care of the people." But then, as soon as sort of the crisis is over, we're like back to unfettered capitalism.
That's right.
Even in the crisis, we don't want to take care of people.
Even in the
well,
Yeah.
600 versus the $2,000 check.
Yes, it just keeps getting worse and worse. But I mean, I'm going.
No, we're
back
just trying to take care of the corporations.
I mean, I just can't believe.
I mean, and we're just moving towards this becoming worse and worse, and which is why we see such a stark difference between Republicans and Democrats, as far as now in the age of Trump. The ugliness has really kind of shown itself. At the end of the day, the Republicans are libertarians, but the Democrats are, at least to some extent, that version of justice, representative democracy that has this like ridiculous idea that it can hold on to unfettered capitalism, which it can't, which is why everything is so messed up.
I mean, socialism has to come in and bail it out almost every time. I mean, like when the banks failed.
It will never come to fruition unless a deep critique of capitalism takes hold. It cannot work. Representative democracy can only work in the United States with capitalism in its libertarian form. Unless there's a major shift in the way we understand capitalism as our basic operating system.
I want to be careful with the way we're using libertarianism right now. So right now,
hey, there's a word.
So I believe we have had a libertarian utopia for the last 4 years. Trump got no legislation passed. I mean, he got the. It wasn't a tax cut. Stop calling it that. What he did was he took the tax brackets and pushed them together. So if you were in the lower tax bracket at that moment, your taxes went up. And if you were in the higher tax bracket, your taxes went down, right? Because if the tax bracket that you were in was charging you 20% and the higher tax bracket was 30%, when it got merged, it's now 25. So your taxes went up 5 points. But if you were at the 30%, your taxes went down 5 points. So the richest Americans did get a little bit of a tax cut, but the poorest Americans got an equally sized tax hike for the first time. since World War II in the United States, since the Great Depression, the rich actually have a functioning tax rate lower than everybody else. They actually have the lowest functioning tax rate. That's the only legislation Trump got through. And then he disassembled the deep state, the so-called deep state. I mean, he didn't disassemble it completely, but he damaged the hell out of it. And he lifted all the regulations he could by executive order. He effectively created no government, to the point where when COVID happened, we had no response. But there were 17 different plans on how to deal with a pandemic, and absolutely zero of them got implemented. Yeah. And the fact that happened is the fruition of libertarianism. No government, raw corrupt capitalism, just rampant capitalism. If you're a libertarian and you think the last 4 years sucked, you're an idiot, because there was your dream come true.
Yeah.
Right.
What the hell are you waiting for?
That's true.
It's amazing because you can split. I feel like you can split the Trump voters. I mean, obviously, but into those who benefited from the tax break, those who didn't, but are willing to pay more so that they can be openly racist. I mean, that's what I see. It's like, how much do you want to spend?
And then those have drunk the Kool-Aid. The group of people who are just, they don't understand anything.
They don't get it. Yeah.
Well, they got to defend the job creators, right? That's their main mission. We got to defend the job creators out here. You guys don't know what you're talking about. There's a reason they're a CEO and they make all this money. Yeah, because
my recording stopped because apparently it was recording to my wrong drive.
Okay. We've got it. So
I guess I'm gonna have to figure out how to splice this together.
Actually, I think that I can send you my file.
Okay.
My video file, and you'll be able to do it.
Okay, great.
And we'll have to cut that out anyway.
Good pause there. Good pause.
That got into a discussion with
excellent timing.
I know.
The liberal guy with.
I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name offhand. There's a Z in it, I think.
Howard Zinn.
No, he's definitely not a libertarian. That guy was a socialist.
I miss him.
So my point in bringing this up was we've actually had what conservatism for most of the United States is history, where it's Nozick, that's it. Where it's capitalism merged with strong government control, strong government interference. Now the question is, in what direction? So Democrats, who by the way are center right, they're actually technically not. They're not leftist. Where they want to do is they want to regulate the economy. And the reason why is because, and FDR is sort of the founder of this thinking. If you don't regulate the economy and you allow unfettered capitalism, that capitalism will turn the labor class into socialists. So what you do is you have to moderate the excesses of capitalism so that the working class doesn't go socialist. Mm-hmm. The right, we believe that the invisible hand is actually literally God interfering in the economy. So when you interfere in the economy, like liberals want to do, you're interfering with God's will. What they want to do then is interfere in your social behavior, tell you what sexual position you can have, whom you can have sex with, when you can have sex, but they don't want to tell you what you do with your wallet. That's the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans traditionally. What happened with Reagan was, because he was, and Nixon tried to go this direction, but he couldn't pull it off, but Reagan pulled it off. Because he was such a rampant racist, and because he hated the lower class so intensely, his goal was to try and replace the movement of the lower class from going to the left towards socialism and have them go to the right. And of course, Trump is the fruition of the Reagan legacy. He is Reaganomics come true, where instead of the working class, a section of the working class realizing that they needed to go to the left, they went to the right, like happened in Germany in the 1920s and 30s. And so we're repeating this cycle. But the result was really interesting because it was I don't think anybody would have predicted it. Normally when the right gains power, like think of Hungary, think of Turkey today, the right clamps down on your freedoms and makes the government stronger. Trump was so incompetent and moronic, he actually went flying the opposite direction. And instead of clamping down control over the government, he lost control of the government. We had no government.
But it doesn't really matter, does it? I
He
mean,
didn't care.
no, and apparently neither did they.
And then, so now we're going to have a group of representatives and senators on the 6th.
Maybe.
I also want to say something else about this whole, I think we ended up talking about how we're talking about a public discourse issue in the sense that words, definitions, political definitions mean how sort of they come about and how are they used. And one of the things is, I'll just come up with this example. There was a discussion in the 80s that took place between two political thinkers, John Rawls and what was Nozick's first name? I don't know what it was, but another political philosopher called Nozick. And the interest, what came out of that discussion for me, more than anything else, was I was reading this in the 2000 something, whatever it was, teens, this material. And what I was hearing Nozick, the top political libertarian thinker, say was so different from what I was hearing in public discourse about libertarianism, right? It was so different. Nozick, for instance, was saying, look, when a pandemic hits, we need to have institutions in place that can take care of us, right? We need public education. We need certain infrastructure to be in place and for government to fund it. And here we have in public discourse an idea, an understanding of libertarianism that is so fluid, and it's so sort of stratified. One person, one group says this, another militia, whatever. It's just like, right? We don't have a clear definition. Nobody is listening to the thinkers, to those who set the definitions in public discourse. We do not, in fact, have a goddamn public discourse. We don't have public intellectuals. We don't have these public philosophers. We don't have these philosophers who are sort of molding these definitions, come on television, in the news, wherever the hell, in the media, and talk about. We don't have public discourse.
Occasionally,
which is why people don't know what things mean.
Yeah.
Dead on.
And even if you have a discourse, because people don't know what things mean, they wouldn't understand what you were saying.
Exactly. You can't have a conversation with someone who doesn't understand what socialism is fundamentally. Like
we've replaced public discourse and thinkers getting together and having conversations, which is still something that happens even in the third world.
Yep.
Happens in the third world. I'll give you all a story about what happens in Iran, for instance, or at least was happening. We've replaced that with freaking 2-second pundits, 1 minute, 30 seconds. I don't know what, a pundits who know nothing, who get on a list, who literally put their own names on a list. They have their, nobody checks their credentials, nothing. They enter a list, and then that reporter goes and looks on this list and randomly picks this person, depending on how much time they have to get the news story out. And the more flagrant and the more sort of inflammatory their language is, the better chance they have on getting on the show.
Right, because the ratings will go up.
Yeah.
The ratings will go up.
Yeah.
And that's what Trump understood.
That's what Trump understood.
Yeah.
They want to cover him all the time because nobody knows what crazy shit he's going to say.
Look what Trump has done to the Washington Post. Like that newspaper was dying. Now it is flourishing. It is doing great.
And Bezos is laughing and laughing. Jeff Bezos thinks
Bezos is laughing.
Yeah, we knew that Trump being the president was going to be great for the media. Yeah.
Let me just ask. Let me pose this question: what would have happened to us had the pandemic hit in 2018? We would all be dead.
You mean why? What's the difference between 2018 and 2020?
Well, because Trump isn't going to get voted out in 2018. We're looking at 2 more years of full on Trump.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I just want to say.
Tell me the story in Iran. What is the story?
Oh, so I remember in the 1990s this was about late 1990s, starting in 1997 all the way to 2000, roughly 2009. I guess that was the death knell. But for those 10 to 12 years, okay, there were many dailies, and they belonged to different factions. And every morning, literally what people would do is go out and buy a newspaper. It was an exciting part of everyone's day. And they would not just buy one newspaper, they would buy several, and they would start comparing these. Two things about these newspapers. One, my great aunt, who never went to public school. She at the time was 90 something years old. Can I see people's faces? Thank you. 90 something years old. Roy was searching for something. Was literally got a big notebook and was clipping newspaper articles, comparing them to each other. Like, this is how involved a 90-something-year-old who had taught herself reading and writing was doing this, just to tell you how this was my great aunt, right? Number one. Number two, I remember, because this is the period where I would go to Iran 2-3 times a year and all the summer. So I would just stay there for 3 months at a time. Cool. And I remember one specific newspaper, which had the highest circulation, called Hamshahri, every weekend on Fridays would have an insert, like the New York Times has an insert, and the insert was about books. Now, books that were being translated from all sorts of sources, whether they were in Malaysia, Indonesia. This was sort of cutting edge Islamic interpretations of texts and hermeneutics, whether it was Gadamerian hermeneutics and it was all related to how to understand Islam and how to sort of a reformist mindset, how to move forward, being Muslims, retaining Islam, but shifting in certain ways in a way that makes sense for us in the 21st century. And this was 20, sometimes 25 pages with long extracts from books. Wow. With if thinkers came together and were having dialogue, the whole thing was translated and put in. I mean, I had never, I have yet to see something like that in the United States.
I mean,
there was literal public discourse. I remember being in a taxi cab, where taxi cabs over there in Tehran are different. It's like they keep going up and down a street and a bunch of people get in and they get off at different times. It's just a different system. And I remember I stayed in that taxi cab, missed where I was going to go just so I could listen to the conversation of two thinkers. Wow. And this man who was the driver was listening to this really intricate discussion about freedom, justice, religion, Islam, how to interpret Islam, all these things between the two top thinkers in Iran at the time. Really, really complicated language. He was following, and so were other people. Everybody was commenting.
Yeah.
I was like,
I mean, it's a stupid population is much easier to control, right? So, I mean, the kids out in the rural areas, we don't care if they've got internet or not. Let's just keep them stupid. They don't need to know the big words. They don't need to understand that, all of these words mean roughly the same thing, but not quite the same thing. They don't understand that when you're in America and a white person commits an act of violence against a citizen, that too is terror. It's back to the etymology. It's all about words. It's semantics. And unfortunately, the semantics are quite important right now. I mean, it's just like democracy. We just voted for what I consider to be a Republican, but he's on the Democratic ticket. So
No, he's a solid Democrat. It's just the Democratic Party is center right.
right.
Yeah.
Because the Republican Party has become extreme right. Right?
Yes.
They're not.
Okay, so who's the Tea Party? Those are libertarians.
They're the extreme far right, but they're kind of getting punked because QAnon is replacing them.
That's a scary
QAnon, right? Yeah, that's true. QAnon and the Proud Boys kind of people.
The extreme far right.
Yeah.
is
And if anybody's planning to go out in DC on the 5th or 6th, don't, because the Proud Boys are going to go out there and they're trying to. I wouldn't put it past Trump to pull an insurrection act if there was protests just like that.
I saw they were closing hotels because of that.
Really?
Yeah, I heard some hotels are closing down.
The Proud Boys are just as violent. I mean, you know, they're pretty bad guys. I think we need Antifa, quite frankly. And there's another word that people don't understand. If they would finish the word out, it's anti-fascism. Let's just keep going with that word. How is that hard? I don't understand that.
Well, because about a third of the country is enamored with the idea of fascism now. I mean, what's the joke? The Germans, a third of the Germans discovered that a third of Germans wanted to kill them, and the other third didn't care.
Oh,
and I think we've just discovered that too. No.
Might be right. Well, guys, do you guys have anything you want to wrap up with?
I want to throw in one last piece, just because it was brought up, which was one person, one vote.
Yes.
It's worth remembering how far we've come and how far we had to travel. That did not become truly part of U.S. law until 1962. The Supreme Court ruled in Baker v. Carr, 1962, that, it should be one person, one vote. And I think it's good to remember things like, wow, we've only been doing this for 59 years.
Look how fucked up
there might be people that you know who were alive when it wasn't the case.
Not anymore.
Not after COVID is done with us.
No, we're all wiped out.
So, and the whole reason for it was because the way we district, the way we use single member district representation in the United States, they had drawn up these districts that were based on old census reports, and it made it so that some districts had 1 million people in them, and some districts had 100,000 people in them, and then of course the districts with 100,000 people, it made it so effectively you had 10 times more representation in Congress than the district with 1 million people in it. And the lawsuit got to the Supreme Court, and it was actually basically 61, 62, 63 that the Supreme Court did, I want to say a half dozen rulings. Baker v. Carr was the most important of them, but that's what sort of codified the idea that no, we can't have districts with that kind of size difference.
But it's not, they don't enforce that then.
No, they do. They enforce Baker v. Carr. The Supreme Court has ruled since then that you should also have compact districts, so in an attempt to sort of make gerrymandering a little harder, and that's not enforced. The districts are insanely shaped.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I got San Antonio. I'm being represented by someone from San Antonio. I'm in 78704. Why am I being represented by somebody from San Antonio? You know?
Welcome to gerrymandering.
City. Yeah, I know. It's been a long time we've been like this. We had Lamar Smith for a long time. Okay, you guys, this has been great. As usual. Awesome. Very informative because we're all so incredibly smart.
That's maybe that's bad news given the anti-intellectualism we just talked about.
So if we're so smart, how come all the dumb people are beating us so badly?
Yeah.
That's a whole nother show, right?
That's the show on cheating. We'll come back to that.
Dang.
Thanks a lot, you guys. I appreciate everyone coming and listening to us. And also, if you live in Georgia, please go vote. Please, dear God, go vote.
In case you didn't know,
there is an election.
2 days. Something amazing is about to happen.
You got to tell them who to vote for if you want them to vote Democrat. So
okay, we want you to vote for Ossoff and Warnock.
Yeah.
Because
And-
the other two, who I don't even want to say their names, are awful clans people, racist, awful people.
And you'll be voting for both. I think a lot of Georgians think they're going to vote for one or the other. You're voting for both.
Also, don't get confused that the clans people were supporting the $2,000 check.
No.
They did it because they had to switch because the president's changed his mind and went for the 2001. They had to immediately switch to. So.
Yeah, if you want that $2,000, you're not on the right team.
I don't think either team's going to give it to you, but
Good call. Good call.
Especially because
But
there's no looming election. What do they care?
Yeah.
Right.
We
You
want
know?
the Senate to be, we hopefully the Senate can go Democrat. Yeah, and maybe we can get something done.
Maybe.
Maybe.
There's still the filibuster.
All right. Well, good luck to Joe and Kamala with their certification. We hope that goes well. And if not, we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Assuming
Thanks, y'all.
we can.
Safe
Assuming
travels,
we can.
Ramesh.
Yeah, safe
you.
travels.
See you soon.
Mhm.